This daily drawing exercise comes from Nuremberg. I was on a train to Berlin and we had just a 15-minute stop at Nuremberg, and it's a city I've always wanted to have a look at. So it was, I guess, a bit frustrating. I didn't dare go more than about 50 metres from the railway station, but this clearly very old tower was just across the road from the station. So I took a photo and reluctantly went back to catch my train, but I thought it would make a nice exercise. I think it's really nicely proportioned. So having looked at it, I decided to start at the top of the tower, which is perhaps a bit unusual for me. And I noticed that the windows under the rather large eave of the circular roof were set back somewhat. So I tried to show that. And then besides this little pointy turret on top, I was paying attention to the banding, the banding that rings around the top part of the tower, and trying to work out exactly what the pattern is, how many bands there are with what sort of gap between them, and also noticing the fact that the tower does move inwards slightly from the banding, and so there is a slight thickening of the tower just under the eaves with the decorative elements there. So trying to work out how to do this. I haven't managed to put the roof line really straight. I didn't realize when I first did that first line, which I actually forgot to video. I didn't have the camera on, but fortunately I spotted that at that stage. But it's not quite at 180 degrees across the paper, so that makes it just a little bit tricky trying to work out what to do, whether to correct the lines underneath or just tilt the paper at the end. So now I'm trying to work out exactly what the pattern of these bands are, and I probably haven't brought the bands quite down enough anyway on the right hand side. Sometimes the positioning of where the camera is and where the lights are does cramp my style, not just for my hand, but also for my head and where my eyes are and the tilt of my head. And sometimes that does make it a bit tricky to just align things perhaps as easily across the page or vertically as I would otherwise find, but not making excuses. So need to establish the tops of these trees, and I basically do that by creating the shape of the tower. So I'm looking at the proportions of the tower as if it were cut out, and I'm putting the tops of the trees in the place that will establish that. And once I've got the trees in place, then I can do a little more detail moving down towards the road. And I decide, surprisingly enough, to put this white van in at this point. I'm not a great fan of drawing vehicles, but they are obviously important in streetscapes, and they are, as people are, as figures are, a great way of establishing scale because we generally have a sense of what size they are. So I put this van in place, and then I need to establish the road and the footpath and the wall that go across the lower section of the drawing, and are also important for a sense of scale and context. And this is where it's really important, I think, really easy, I think, with these sorts of details, to allow too much height between our horizontal lines and to not really compress things as much as the perspective does compress them. So finishing the details of the van. This drawing took me, I think, about 14 minutes to do in real time. So I did find I am pretty tired today, so I think I just slowed down with my general tiredness towards the end. Whereas normally when I'm drawing these daily exercises, I am having an eye on the clock. I really just didn't even think to do that. And so now I'm doing the stonework. Now, They are very small, the stones. They're not bricks, they are stones. If you get closer to the tower, they're of a reasonable size, but it's a very large tower, and we are some distance away from it enough. And so I don't want to let the stones get too large in my drawing, because then it will make the tower look probably smaller than it really is. So I do want to keep the scale of these stones. If I'm going to err on larger or smaller, I'd rather err on the side of making them too small than too large. So that's what I'm doing at this stage. So I'm just suggesting the detail here, just suggesting the detail. I'm not drawing the exactness of it at all. And unfortunately, I have flattened these lines that go horizontally, the bands of stonework that go across the tower. I haven't allowed that curve as well as I could have, which is a shame, because I really do like that slight indication of curve. I mean, the actual drawing still looks okay. I think the distance, the scale, the perspective still allows it to look credible. It just slightly changes my viewing position. It makes me as if I was standing probably 5 or 6 feet higher than I really was. And so now working on this building to the side, just trying to add now some context and therefore some scale to the building. So I've got this rather tricky decorative end, gable end to a building there, to a roof there, trying to get that in place, and also get these trees that go across the base. Trees, I always think, are a great contrast to architecture, not just possibly in value, in lightness and darkness, but also in line work and in shape. So they're a great natural form, often with a very fussy silhouette edge, as opposed to straight or at least smooth lines in architecture. So again, this is probably where I began to get just a little bit slow and thinking too much and being not quite as brisk as I probably could have been. And I'm still not really sure how much off to the right I'm going to draw at this point. I don't think I intended to completely go to the edge of my reference, although I finish up going reasonably close to the edge. And I decide to put this cyclist in. I don't ride a bike myself, so I'm not overly familiar with them or their construction. So it's always a bit of a challenge doing a cyclist. And again, this is where I'm drawing the effect of the detail, not the detail. Because of the scale of this figure and the bicycle I'm drawing, it's better to try and suggest a person on a bike rather than actually draw the exactness, the detail of a person on the bike. And I do even less suggestion of the bike than I do of the person. I'm really just trying to, with the person, capture a pose of someone sitting down with their arms out. And the bicycle, I don't know that it's really much more than 2 ellipses and a diagonal line between them. So I've really kept the detail there light, because what I don't want is a lot of lines close together that end up visually, if not actually, joining up and just looking blotchy, because that then just draws awkward attention to it. And so I'm getting pretty much to the end of it. I've realised I've gone over the time I wanted to spend on it, so I'm going pretty fast and loose with the final details of the architecture that sits on each side of the tower. And for the tower here, I just avoid doing too heavy straight lines down the sides, because I feel like for stonework, it's just a little too smooth and slick. And then a little bit of more work on some hatching to suggest the tiling on some of the roofs I decided not to do it on the roof of our actual main subject of the tower. I decided to leave that much lighter than it comparatively is in the reference. Perhaps if I'd had a bit more time, I might have thought it was worth experimenting. So another stroke across the front just to frame the roadway, and we're done. What do you think? A quick drawing of a, I presume, late medieval tower in the German city of Nuremberg. If you'd like to have a go drawing this, I've posted this image on my channel community page, so you can do a screenshot of it and have a go drawing it yourself. There are some good things here to push us to test our accuracy, and also some variation of form and of line work, and a few different ways we can practice our technique of drawing the effective details, not the actual details. But look, whatever you draw and however you draw it, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.